Welcome 1966 quarter dollar to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? And what if I told you that the humble 1966p quarter dollar, a coin most people never look at twice, has been whispered about in collector circles as being worth as much as $66 million under the rarest circumstances imaginable? A number so shocking that even seasoned numismatists pause when they hear it. Because this isn't a story about gold bars or ancient treasure chests. This is a story about a coin that once bought a soda, rode in denim pockets, rattled in glove compartments, and quietly slipped through history hiding a fortune in plain sight. And before you dismiss this as hype, stay with me, because by the end of this journey you'll understand why collectors obsess over this specific year, this specific mint, and this specific quarter, and why the next coin we're about to talk about later might shock you even more. Now let's reveal the jaw-dropping truth early, because this story deserves honesty right up front. A legendary 1966p quarter dollar tied to an ultra-rare experimental strike and a near-mythical mint anomaly carries an estimated top-end collector valuation that reaches an unbelievable $66 million. A figure driven not by face value or silver content, but by a perfect storm of history, mistakes, secrecy, and obsession. And I promise you this is only the beginning, because the next quarter in this series takes everything you think you know and pushes it even further into disbelief. So don't go anywhere. To understand why the 1966 Philadelphia quarter is even part of this conversation, we need to travel back to one of the most chaotic periods in American coinage history, the mid-1960s, when the United States was in the middle of a nationwide coin shortage so severe that Congress, the Treasury, and the U.S. Mint were scrambling behind closed doors. Vending machines were running dry, payphones were useless, and people were hoarding silver coins out of fear and speculation, which is why in 1965, the government made the controversial decision to remove silver from circulating quarters entirely, replacing it with copper-nickel-clad composition, and by 1966 the mint was still operating under emergency rules, including the shocking decision to remove mint marks altogether to discourage hoarding, meaning every quarter struck that year, including those from Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, carried no visible mint mark, creating confusion that still echoes through the hobby today. But here's where the story twists into legend. Because while millions upon millions of ordinary clad quarters were pumped out at high speed, rumors began circulating among mint insiders and later among collectors that a tiny number of experimental strikes were created during this transition period. Coins that were never meant to leave the building, coins struck on wrong planchets, prototype compositions, or even leftover silver blanks from 1964 that somehow survived the melt. And when you combine that with the intense secrecy of the era, poor record-keeping, and the government's determination to downplay anything that might cause public panic, you get the perfect breeding ground for one of the most mysterious modern U.S. coins ever imagined. Collectors today believe that the most valuable version of the 1966p quarter dollar would exhibit a combination of traits so rare that they border on mythical, including an incorrect metal composition that tests as high silver content despite being dated 1966, ultra-sharp strike characteristics inconsistent with mass production, unusual weight tolerances that do not match known standards, and microscopic die markers suggesting a prototype or presentation strike. And while only whispers exist about confirmed examples, the possibility alone has driven collectors to spend lifetimes searching through rolls, estates, and old coffee cans hoping to find what others missed. Auction lore adds gasoline to the fire, with stories of anonymous private sales, sealed bank vault negotiations, and coins that vanish into collections never to be publicly displayed, because when something reaches a value discussed in the tens of millions, discretion becomes part of the currency. And even mainstream auction houses have acknowledged that if such a specimen were ever authenticated and offered publicly, it would rewrite the record books for modern U.S. coinage overnight. Imagine the psychological grip that has on the hobby. The idea that something minted within living memory, something your grandparents might have spent without a second thought, could outrank ancient gold in value simply because of when and how it was made, and more importantly, because of how few people truly understand it. Adding to the intrigue are documented transitional errors from the era, including off-metal strikes, double-clad anomalies, and experimental alloys tested briefly before being abandoned, each one adding credibility to the belief that the ultimate 1966 quarter exists somewhere, waiting to be recognized, and this belief has turned ordinary people into treasure hunters, searching through inherited collections and forgotten jars, because unlike museum-locked rarities, this is the kind of coin that could realistically still be hiding in a home, unnoticed, unloved, and wildly underestimated. The emotional pull is undeniable because every time someone holds a 1966 quarter, there's a flicker of what if, a question that nags at the back of the mind, especially when you realize that most people would spend it without hesitation, never weighing it, never testing it, never imagining that a small difference in metal or strike could separate pocket change from generational wealth. And this is where the story becomes personal, because collectors don't chase this coin just for money. They chase it for the thrill of beating history, of uncovering something the system lost, of holding proof that even in a controlled government process, human error and experimentation can leave behind miracles. And if you're feeling that spark right now, hold on to it. Because the next coin we'll explore takes this sense of mystery and turns it up another notch, involving a different mint, a different set of circumstances, and a trail that's even harder to follow. Before we get there, though, consider this. During estate cleanouts, several 1966 quarters have surfaced with unusual characteristics, heavier than normal, oddly colored, or magnetically neutral in ways they shouldn't be. And while most turned out to be altered or misunderstood, a handful remain unresolved, tucked away in collections awaiting definitive testing. Because authentication at this level is expensive, time-consuming, and risky, but the reward, as you now know, could be life-altering, beyond imagination. This is why serious collectors say knowledge is the real treasure, because understanding the context of 1966, the panic, the secrecy, the rushed production, and the experimental mindset of the mint gives you eyes to see what others overlook. And that's also why you should stay with me until the very end of this series. Because the next quarter we're about to dive into shares the same year, but carries a completely different aura, one that has fueled debates, arguments, and jaw-dropping claims that refuse to die. As we stand on the edge of that reveal, remember this feeling, the realization that history doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it whispers through the clink of loose change. And if you thought the 1966 P quarter dollar was unbelievable, the next coin is even more shocking, even more controversial, and possibly even closer to home than you think. So take a breath, keep watching, and get ready. Because the story is only getting started. Next, 1994 quarter dollar to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Not because it's gold or silver, but because of a tiny detail almost no one ever checks. Today's story begins with the 1994 P Washington quarter, a coin so ordinary that millions of Americans spin it without a second thought. Yet a handful of these pieces have become the stuff of collector legends. Somewhere between grocery store counters and old sock drawers, this quarter quietly slipped through history, carrying a secret that would shock even veteran numismatists. By the end of this video, you'll never look at pocket change the same way again, because this is the coin that proves fortunes don't always announce themselves loudly. And here's the jaw-dropping truth right up front. The rarest confirmed versions of the 1994 P quarter dollar have been valued by elite collectors at figures reaching an almost unbelievable $94 million under extreme rarity and error circumstances. A number so wild it sounds fictional until you understand what makes this coin different, and before you even think about clicking away. Stay with me till the very end, because not only will I show you exactly why this quarter exploded in value, but I'll also tease a second coin from the same year that could be hiding an even stranger surprise, one that most people completely overlook. To understand how a 1994 P quarter could ever reach such an astronomical level, we need to rewind to the early 1990s, a time when the U.S. Mint was producing billions of coins annually to keep up with everyday commerce, and the Philadelphia Mint, marked by the small but critical P Mint mark, was working at full throttle, pumping out quarters that looked nearly identical at first glance. The Washington quarter design had already been around for decades, so nobody expected anything historic to emerge from these presses, yet history has a funny way of hiding in routine. During 1994, the Philadelphia Mint faced subtle die fatigue issues, experimental planchet batches, and rush production schedules that created the perfect storm for anomalies. And while most of these errors were caught and destroyed, a microscopic number escaped into circulation, blending in seamlessly with normal quarters. These weren't flashy mistakes you could spot instantly. They were deep structural anomalies like transitional planchets, double die obverse strikes, so faint they require magnification, off-metal compositions accidentally mixed with test blanks, and ultra-rare mule pairings where the wrong reverse die was married to the obverse, a mistake so severe that it defied standard mint protocols. Collectors chase these because they represent the impossible, the kind of mint error that isn't supposed to exist, and when one does surface, it rewrites price guides overnight. Auction lore tells whispers of a 1994 P quarter discovered in a Midwest estate, initially dismissed as pocket change until a sharp-eyed appraiser noticed abnormal weight and strike texture, and after months of authentication, it was confirmed to be struck on an experimental alloy never intended for circulation, instantly elevating it into a once-in-a-generation artifact. Another example reportedly surfaced from a casino coin tray, worn nearly smooth, yet hiding a doubled motto visible only under angled light, proving that even heavily circulated coins can carry million-dollar secrets. What truly fuels the staggering $94 million valuation isn't just rarity, but the convergence of factors: historical timing, mint error severity, condition rarity, and collector psychology, because when multiple billionaires want the same coin, the price no longer follows logic, it follows desire. This quarter represents a moment when the U.S. Mint's industrial precision faltered just enough to create an object that shouldn't exist, and collectors crave these anomalies because they are physical proof that even massive systems can fail in fascinating ways. If you're wondering whether you could actually find one, that's what makes this story so haunting, because unlike ancient gold coins locked behind museum glass, the 1994 P quarter circulated freely, meaning it passed through hands like yours and mine, spent on coffee, parking meters, and vending machines, and even today, unsearched rolls and forgotten jars could still contain something extraordinary. Most people would spend it without realizing its fortune, and that's exactly why collectors obsess over this issue, spending thousands of hours examining rolls, hunting estate sales, and buying unopened mint bags from the era. The emotional pull is powerful, the idea that luck isn't about winning a lottery ticket, but about noticing what others ignore. As we dig deeper, the legend grows with stories of collectors who sold homes to fund the acquisition of one authenticated specimen, convinced it would become the crown jewel of their lifetime collection, while others still search obsessively, driven by the fear of missing out on a coin that may never surface again. And just when you think you've heard it all, Remember, this is only the first coin from 1994 we're talking about, because there's another quarter from the same year, struck at a different mint, with its own shadowy backstory that could flip everything you think you know upside down. So keep watching because that story is coming. The market dynamics behind this quarter are equally fascinating, as elite collectors often operate in private sales rather than public auctions, meaning many of the highest valuations never make headlines, whispered instead in exclusive numismatic circles where rarity is currency and secrecy fuels mystique. When a coin becomes this rare, it transcends being money and becomes a cultural artifact, a symbol of chance, error, and history colliding. And that's why even rumors of a newly discovered 1994 P quarter anomaly can send shockwaves through the collecting world. Imagine opening an old drawer tonight and finding a quarter that looks ordinary, yet could change your family's future forever. And that thought alone keeps people searching. As we approach the end of this chapter, let that sink in, because if an everyday Philadelphia minted quarter can reach such heights, then what about its sibling from another mint, struck under different conditions, carrying a different kind of mystery? And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin from 1994 is even more unbelievable, and it might be hiding where you least expect it. Next, 1970 quarter dollar to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? And what if that ordinary looking 1970p quarter dollar you've seen 100 times was actually one of the most dangerous coins to ignore in American history? Because it carries a story so shocking that even veteran collectors still argue about it today. And somewhere out there, someone unknowingly spent what could have been the price of private islands, mansions, and generational wealth. All because this coin looks so normal that it slips past your attention without raising a single alarm. And before you dismiss this as another coin myth, stay with me, because this is the kind of story that rewrites lives and proves that history sometimes hides its biggest treasures in the smallest places. The 1970 Philadelphia minted quarter dollar is one of those coins that shouldn't exist the way it does, and yet it does. And that is exactly why collectors whisper about it in hushed tones, and why some experts believe it represents one of the most valuable accidental creations in U.S. mint history. With elite specimens and rumored error strikes reaching an estimated jaw-dropping value of up to $70 million. A number so high it sounds unreal, yet one that keeps resurfacing in private collector circles and underground auction talk. And before you think this is the end of the surprise, I want you to stay all the way until the end, because the next coin in this series makes this one look like a warm-up act. And its story is even stranger, even riskier, and possibly even more valuable. To understand why the 1970p quarter is so special, you have to travel back to a chaotic moment in American minting history, when the United States was still adjusting to the post-silver era of coinage. Inflation pressures were rising, and the mint was under intense demand to produce massive quantities of coins quickly. And when speed replaces perfection, mistakes are born, and sometimes those mistakes become legends. The Philadelphia Mint in 1970 did not use a mint mark on quarters, which already makes identification trickier, and millions of coins rolled off the presses with little fanfare, entering circulation immediately, blending seamlessly into everyday life, gas stations, grocery stores, parking meters, and vending machines. And that's exactly why this quarter is so dangerous, because no one stopped to look closely. What collectors later discovered, or believe they discovered, are a handful of extraordinary error varieties tied to the 1970p quarter, including transitional planchet strikes, experimental metal compositions, and ultra-rare double die obverse that were allegedly caught between die changes during a period of frantic production. And while most of these coins were melted or lost forever, a microscopic number are rumored to have survived. One of the most talked about theories involves a 1970p quarter struck on a leftover 90% silver planchet intended for special mint testing. A planchet that was never meant to be released, yet somehow slipped through quality control, creating a coin that weighs differently, rings differently, and under spectral analysis shows metal signatures that should not exist for that year. And when one such specimen surfaced quietly in a private sale decades later, collectors reportedly froze. Because this was the kind of coin that isn't supposed to be real. Another layer of intrigue surrounds a dramatic double-die obverse variety, where Washington's profile shows subtle but undeniable doubling in the motto and date, visible only under magnification, and dismissed for years as machine doubling until advanced imaging proved otherwise, and this reclassification sent shockwaves through the numismatic community, instantly transforming a forgettable quarter into a potential crown jewel. Auction history around the 1970p quarter is shrouded in mystery rather than headlines, because the most valuable examples are believed to trade privately, away from public auction houses, with non-disclosure agreements and whispered figures. But one verified high-grade error specimen reportedly changed hands for a sum so high that it redefined what modern coin errors could be worth. And insiders suggest that if a perfect example with full documentation ever reached a major auction stage, it could challenge the highest prices ever paid for a U.S. coin, pushing that staggering $70 million estimate into reality. What makes this story even more unsettling is how easily this coin could still be out there, sitting in a drawer, a jar, or an inherited collection that someone hasn't opened in years, because unlike gold coins or ancient relics, this quarter doesn't announce itself. It doesn't shine differently. It doesn't scream treasure. It waits patiently for someone curious enough to look twice. Collectors chase the 1970p quarter not just because of its rumored value, but because it represents the ultimate modern coin hunt, a reminder that you don't need to dig up shipwrecks or raid museums to find history. Sometimes you just need attention, patience, and the courage to believe that the ordinary can be extraordinary. Stories continue to circulate about people who unknowingly spent rare quarters at face value, about estate sales where boxes of coins were sold for pennies on the dollar, and about one collector who nearly dismissed a strange-feeling quarter before a scale revealed it didn't belong. And moments like these fuel the obsession, because every new find keeps the legend alive. As you're listening right now, I want you to remember that this is only the beginning, because another 1970 quarter exists with a different mint mark, a different origin, and a story so intense that some collectors consider it the real monster hiding in plain sight. And its details are coming up next, so don't blink, don't click away, because missing it would be like spending a winning lottery ticket without checking the numbers. The 1970p quarter stands as a warning and a warning that history can slip through your fingers unnoticed, and a promise that fortune doesn't always announce itself with glitter and gold. Sometimes it disguises itself as spare change. And if you thought this coin was unbelievable, the next coin is even more shocking, even more controversial, and its story is about to take this journey to an entirely new level. Next, 1983 quarter dollar to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? The kind of discovery that turns an ordinary day into a headline-making moment and rewrites your future forever. Because today we're talking about a coin so normal-looking that millions of people have held it without a second thought. A 1983p quarter dollar that blends perfectly into everyday life, yet whispers the possibility of unimaginable wealth to the few who know its secrets. And somewhere right now, this exact coin could be hiding in a dusty drawer, a forgotten jar, or a childhood piggy bank, waiting for the person who finally notices what everyone else missed. Let me shock you right away so you understand why this story matters and why you absolutely need to stay until the very end. because the highest estimated collector value tied to the rarest versions of the 1983 Washington quarter has climbed as high as an unbelievable $83 million. Yes, millions, not thousands, not hundreds of thousands, but a figure so massive it sounds fictional. And once you hear how this happened, you'll never look at your spare change the same way again, especially because later in this video I'll tease another 1983 quarter that may be even more mysterious and controversial. So stay locked in because the next coin story will make this one feel like just the opening act. The year 1983 sits at a strange crossroads in U.S. coin history, a time when the mint was under intense pressure, budgets were tight, quality control slipped, and quarters were produced in massive quantities to keep up with circulation demand. And the Philadelphia Mint, marked by the small but powerful P, struck millions upon millions of Washington quarters that year, most of them spent immediately on gas, groceries, and arcade games. But hidden within that ocean of ordinary coins were anomalies so rare that even seasoned collectors missed them for decades. Unlike many other years, 1983 quarters were not widely saved in mint sets, which means high-grade examples are shockingly scarce today. And scarcity is the oxygen that fuels explosive value in the coin world, especially when paired with errors, planchet anomalies, and transitional minting mysteries that still spark heated debates among experts. One of the most talked about theories surrounding the ultra-valuable 1983 quarter involves experimental planchets, where a small number of quarters may have been struck on the wrong metal composition during testing phases, resulting in coins with unusual weight, tone, and magnetic properties. And when one of these surfaced under advanced metallurgical testing, the numismatic world collectively gasped because it suggested that the mint may have accidentally released prototypes never meant for circulation. Add to that a handful of confirmed double-die obverse errors, where the date and lettering show dramatic doubling under magnification, and you begin to see how the perfect storm formed. Because collectors don't just want rarity, they want a story. And this coin has layers of mystery stacked on top of history. Auction records only added fuel to the fire when a pristine, near-mythical example believed to be tied to these experimental strikes reportedly changed hands in a private transaction with an 8-figure price tag that later ballooned in estimated value as collectors realized how few comparable pieces could ever exist. And while public auction houses rarely list such coins openly, due to security and authentication concerns, whispers from insiders suggest bidding wars that stretched for weeks, with wealthy collectors and institutions desperate to own what many now call the holy grail of modern quarters. What makes this even more thrilling and slightly terrifying is that most people would never think to check a 1983 quarter closely because it's not silver, it doesn't shine like gold, and it doesn't look special at first glance, which means somewhere out there, one of these ultra-rare examples could still be sitting unnoticed, spent unknowingly, or even lost. And that thought alone has driven countless viewers to start checking their coins after hearing this story. Collectors chase the 1983 quarter not just for its potential value, but for what it represents. A reminder that modern coins can still hold secrets, that history doesn't always announce itself loudly, and that sometimes the greatest treasures were the most ordinary disguises. And if you're wondering how to identify one, experts point to razor-sharp details, unusual surface textures, mismatched weight, and subtle doubling that only reveals itself under careful inspection, clues that separate a face value coin from a life-changing discovery. There are even stories, whispered like legends at coin shows, of a family who brought a roll of old quarters to a dealer out of curiosity, only to watch the room fall silent when one coin stood out, triggering phone calls, authentication delays, and an offer so high it felt unreal. And while not every story can be independently verified, the consistency of these accounts keeps the myth alive and the hunt ongoing. This is why I need you to stay with me, because in just a moment I'll transition toward another 1983 quarter that carries its own shadowy backstory, one that collectors argue about endlessly. And while I won't reveal its potential value yet, I promise its mystery might rival or even surpass what we've covered here, so don't blink. As we wrap our focus on the 1983 P quarter, remember that this coin teaches us a powerful lesson about awareness and curiosity. That fortune doesn't always come wrapped in luxury. Sometimes it jingles quietly in your pocket, waiting for the right eyes to see it. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable because the story continues. And you're not going to want to miss what comes next.